in listen-only mode.
Good morning and good evening. It is great to be here on this gorgeous day, and we have summer. It's supposed to be 35 degrees today, and I'm going to let you into a little secret. I've just come back from the gym and I was having a protein bar just as Simon turned everything off. So got a bit of a mouthful. Sorry. I hope you guys have all been having a great week. And I want to impress upon you all to absolutely savor every moment. Right now, I seem to be surrounded by unfortunate illness and sadness. And so we want to take advantage of every moment of joy that we can experience and joy that we can give to other people, and be there to support those who need us when times are tough. Enthusiasm makes ordinary people extraordinary. In many of the motivational courses and marketing courses that I have done, enthusiasm is the key word to anything. It is infectious, it's inspiring, and it will carry you places where few venture. So being enthusiastic and very positive is, for me, very important in life. Now we have a gift for everyone that's attended the webinar. Any orders placed before the 15th of November this year, you will receive the instructions and designs and pattern to make this beautiful magic pillow. It's value of $20. The free project will be emailed after the 15th of November. And this is such a gorgeous pillow. And it has many, many applications. I know you will just love it. I have been asked for a long time for the directions for this little pillow. Now, for those of you who have known me for a long time, a very long time now, and if you go back to when I joined the industry in 1991, you may like to remember that the sewing machine company that I was working for did not have an embroidery machine. I think there was only one company that actually had an embroidery machine, and that was the Singer Company. And all Faf had was beautiful decorative stitches. And I love it, and I absolutely love what you can do. So not only are you being taught techniques, we are being taught embroidery techniques, we are being taught sewing techniques. It is so much fun. And I think I can hear you in the background, Simon. Hello.
Hi.
You're a bit noisy. I can hear a lot of scratching going on down there. Okay.
Called typing questions.
Oh, is that what you're doing? So you'll have to put up with the little typing. I think he means typing answers. All right. So we have two pictures here. On the left-hand side, for those people who don't have an embroidery machine or do not want to do the decorative pieces, so we'll look at the left-hand side. Yes, this is an embroidery directly onto fabric in the center, but if you don't have an embroidery machine, you could replace that with some fabric decoupage. And these are little applique hearts, which are very easy to do. And yes, these have been done with hoop embroidery, but once again, you can do that manually. Any little pieces of lace embroidery that you'll see on the quilt, you can use your own store-bought lace. For those of you who have an embroidery machine, you will notice in the cornerstones of the inner border, we have freestanding lace, 3D flowers embroidering directly onto fabric, butterflies, 3D butterflies. Again, these are freestanding lace designs. Whoops, we went a bit quick there. Oh, sorry. Then we have 3D and embroidered decoupage here. And again, we have embroidered applique, embroidered lace, and the 3D. Now this is block 1. Now you will understand that in the time frame that we have, I cannot go step by step through every block. There are 8 blocks and borders and other techniques. But I will explain the techniques that we have in this block. This is done with a template. Now you are given the pattern for the template, and if you notice, every piece of the fan template, there are 4 pieces, have exactly the same pattern from a floral fabric in each one. So this is called fussy cutting. So you learn fussy cutting, you learn applique, you learn, my thing is just, I'm so sorry, so touchy today, and stitch building, and applique using decorative stitches. For those of you who don't know what echo quilting is parallel rows of stitching, which you can see at the top of the fan here, and they are following the shape of the fan, and they're uniformly spaced. And then you have the option of doing stipple quilting, which is in the top left-hand corner. We also, you will notice the tassel in the bottom right-hand corner. That is done with the single pattern button for a circular satin stitch ball, and the tassels are done, the actual tassel part of the tassel as opposed to the knot, are done with free motion straight stitching. So let's recap. You get the pattern to do the fussy cutting fan templates. Now to finish off the fan, because you only get the 4 templates, you piece the fan with 1/4-inch seams, and we cut, each fan template piece has a 1/4-inch seam allowance. So once we've pieced it, press the seams flat and open, and we have trimmed the little pieces that will stick up there away. We will have a 1/4-inch extra on the outside edges of the fan. So we trim those edges off. So trim it from here and here. And we've also, once it has been pieced, we iron a double-sided fusible web to it. We find the center of our block on the diagonal by marking our block with vertical and horizontal and diagonal lines that intersect through the center of the block. We then position our fan on the diagonal in the center of our block and pin it in place, and then get a ruler to extend the lines. Sorry, my other phone's ringing. I'm turning it off, it won't stop ringing. Extend the lines down like this from both sides to find your pattern piece in here. Then you fuse your pieced fan to the block on the diagonal, and also you will have put the fusible web on the back of this little section. So you butt that up and fuse it all together, and then you do your decorative applique stitches. I just chose to do a triple stitch to break up the fan segments by stitching in the ditch. I also chose to extend with decorative stitching between the pieces of the fan. I just can't help it. I just go with decorative stitches. Now, the one thing I do want to impress with you, particularly if you are new to stitch building, is that the shorter the length of any pattern, the easier it is to stitch around curves. And if you're new to it, I suggest you use a single pattern button so that you stitch one stitch and then the machine will stop sewing and pivot till you get used to the fact that you never pivot until a stitch pattern length has been stitched. This goes for any stitching that you're doing with applique. Also, try out your stitches on the same fabric that you're going to be stitching on. So you would have the calico or muslin backed with sheer magic, then you would iron your fusible fleece to the back of it, and then you would have a tearaway magic stabilizer at the back of your stitches. So prepare a sample like this so you can practice all your stitches. And remember, do not hold back. That means hold your fabric from the front of the foot to retard the feeding when you're doing decorative stitching, or to pull the fabric through from the back of the foot. Both techniques will absolutely distort your stitching. Now, when we had finished putting the quilt together, we decided we wanted to add some embroidery. So we added the 3 layered embroidered 3D flowers, and using my magic tassel maker by machine and all the directions to make the tassel by machine come in detail and steps with the little tool, we made our own tassel by machine. You will need a beading or large cording foot to make the tassel for your machine. So Simon, how are the questions going? Didn't get an answer. Maybe he's turned the sound down. All right.
We haven't had very many, so I think
we're doing okay. Now, this I call cheating crazy patchwork. Another really fun technique that I love, that I have taught over the years. What you need to do, every block in any quilt that I do or anything that I'm going to do, I mark it with vertical, horizontal and diagonal lines that intersect through the center of my fabric. And you will have a pattern for you to print off. And remember, if you want to enlarge any of these blocks that have patterns, all you have to do is extend or enlarge the pattern that you get and you print it off by enlarging it on a photocopier. Now you will notice that the center, we start off with a multi-sided, not necessarily even section in the center. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides to that. But you can have as any number of sides that you wish, and have it large enough so that you can put something in the center. Now you use a fabric marking pen to mark these sections, and then choose, and I've chosen 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 sections that I'm going to put fabric in. Now trace these sections onto the rough side or the fusible side of a double-sided fusible web. Now, if you trace it on the paper side, you will be mirroring it when you put it on the back of your piece of fabric that you're going to iron in the shapes that you want to iron your fabric on. So remember, you know how I know that? Because I've done it so many times on the wrong side for this technique. So once you've ironed your fabric shapes in, you then can decide exactly what you want to do in your other shapes. And you can see here I've done rows of decorative stitching. Now in the instructions you get a picture and the stitch width, length and pattern length of stitches that I suggest are good for this technique. Now here, for example, I would have ruled diagonal lines for these stitches. Here again, these are still a bit diagonal but nearly vertical. Again, I use a blue pen or maybe a purple pen. Let's say a purple pen, because you probably do all this stitching at once, to mark out where I'm going to fill in the stitches to make it look like faux fabric. And here I would make a diagonal grid in both directions. And here I've decided to add some satin stitching to my stripe. Now our purple stitches are going to be where we're going to fill in with decorative stitches, and to cover the raw fabric edges and to divide the crazy patchwork shapes, do that in blue, and when you do the stitching to cover the edges of the shapes and the fabric, do it all in the one colour. And this is just like hand-stitched crazy patchwork. The centre is done, you stipple quilt. If you don't want to stipple quilt it, you're not comfortable in that, you can again use rows of stitching that represents stipple quilting, or a quilting stitch on the centre shape before you do the embroidery in the centre of the block. This is again a really fun technique. You can extend the crazy patchwork shapes and make it into a pillow should you choose to. Now at the beginning of the directions you are told how many embroidery designs that you have to do of each design. This is a guide. Should you choose to use more, by all means go ahead and do it. And you can see here that Robbie and I chose to use the little continuous daisy as a divide on some of the edges of our cheating crazy patchwork. And you can see how gorgeous the decorative stitches look. How are we going, Si?
Yep, no questions.
My goodness, am I getting that good? Now, this is called cheating patchwork. So let's have a close look at it. So you can see there's two lots of pink in these two strips. And what have we got here? We've got two lots of purple, and we've got pink in this one, and we've got floral fabric. What you have to do is cut strips of fabric that are, and I'm using my memory for this, I think they're 1 inch strips, and these ones are 1/2 inch strips. And I have ironed a fusible web to the back of the strips. So let's deal with, I haven't got the top, let's say this is the top. So this is our 1 inch strip, and this is our 1/2 inch strip. Now we have 1/4 inch seams. So what we're going to do for the very top strip, at the top of your block, I'm going to do it here, it's going to be easier for you. So you can see here that our pink strip here, our floral strip here is 1 inch, and these are our woven strips. Now we have a seam here which is taken in part of the top of that strip. So here we have a green strip with a woven pink strip. So the first strip at the top of the block, and I have made sure that the strips extend beyond the edge of the blocks, and the blocks are all made bigger so you can cut them to piecing size. So for those of you who are familiar with strip piecing, this is strip piecing virtually. with a twist. So over the top of our block, we are going to lay our floral strip. Wrong side of fabric to right side of block, and I would suggest that you stitch it to the block with a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the top. Before you do anything else, you come with a sharp pair of scissors and make vertical cuts in the fabric that is stitched to the block. And you flip every second one, that one, and that one, those strips back that way. Flip it back that way, remember it's stitched, and then you lay your pink strip down. In effect, you then come and flip these back over the top of the pink strip, and it looks like it has been woven. And then you just alternate this down the block. But the next strip of fabric is this green strip, and you put the right side of the fabrics together, stitch them together with a 1/4 inch seam, flip the fabric back, and again cut, 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 cut. You can alternate your cuts if you like. Weave, 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 and flip back. And again, right side of fabric, you just continue till you've covered the block. When you have finished, fuse it to the block. It makes it that much easier for you. And then you're going to cover the raw fabric edges with decorative stitching. So there's 2 ways you can do it. You can stitch around each section here and then come back, or you can just stitch down your sections like this. It doesn't matter how you do it. It's your choice as long as all the raw fabric edges are covered with decorative stitching. You can insert a piece of store-bought lace, say in this seam. While you're putting this piece of fabric over the top of this completed strip, lay a piece of lace with the straight edge of the lace aligned with the edge of the fabric that's already been woven, and then place your other piece of fabric over the top of the lace, stitch it, and then when you come back you can flip the 2 pieces down and over, or you can put the right side of the lace facing up, or a piece of ribbon or a piece of braid, and incorporate it in the seam of the next strip. There are many things that you can do to decorate. You can embroider strips, as we did here, and then place them as your woven piece of fabric or just as a decorative trim. The sky is the limit when it comes to your creativity and what you want to do to cover the raw fabric edges of your woven cheating patchwork. You can enlarge the size of the strips, make them into pillows. I have seen whole jackets made with this technique where the patterns pieces are cut out, enlarged, and then this technique has been done on the jackets. You can make purses. There are so many things you can do using this technique. Again, stitch suggestions are there for you. Again, practice, 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 practice before you do the real thing. Now, I love using twin needles to quilt. I did twin needle quilting far back as 1991 when I made my first quilt, which was called the Pfaff Heritage Quilt. Now, there isn't a lot of technique in doing this, but you need to know how to handle twin needles when you are using them, period, and when you are quilting with them. So we will have our fabric, our sheer magic, our quilt magic, for all our blocks, iron to the back of our block. Then use a fabric marking pen to do meandering intersecting lines that go on your block that do intersect and cross over. You can see the intersections here, here, and here. Now, depending on the size of your maximum stitch width, of your machine, most machines today have at least a 7 millimeter maximum stitch width. I know Benina and Faf have a 9 millimeter stitch width. So get a twin needle that suits the maximum stitch width of your machine. Now we're only going to be sewing a straight stitch. You can see the straight stitch. And we're going to use 2 spools of thread if you have not used a twin needle before. So place 2 spools of thread through on your machine, whether you have a vertical. If you have a vertical spool holder, that makes it easy. If you have a horizontal spool, you will probably have some way to attach a second spool to your machine. You thread both spools through the tension at one time. Both spools through either the left hand or right hand side of the tension discs, and then you thread one of the threads through the left needle and one through the right. And the easiest way to do this is because you can't use your needle threader, is to cut your thread at an angle. Use a pair of very fine tip tweezers and place a little bit of spit on your finger and then rub it on the back of the needle. Use the tweezers to place the thread through the eye of the needle. The saliva will help pull the thread through the eye of the needle enough for you to grab it with your tweezers at the back. So thread both your needles. Now when you start off with twin needle quilting, start off a little inside the edge of the fabric. You are going to need to pull the bobbin thread to the top of your fabric. So do one stitch down, the needle will come up, and remember to engage your tension and lower your foot. Then pull on the bobbin thread and the needle thread will come up. Now if you have problems doing that with the foot down, just raise the foot and pull the bobbin thread up. Now hold, it will probably come up through the left needle, if my memory serves me right. Hold the 2 threads in your left hand, lower the foot and use your automatic tie off button to tie off the threads. Pull the threads to the back of your foot and sew your meandering rows of stitching, and you notice you get this really gorgeous puffed up twin needles rows of stitching. When you are curving, do not sew any of this fast. Sew it slowly as you are curving. I suggest you go at a medium to slow speed when you're doing twin needle stitching. We also this is teaching you to be brave with free motion quilting too. So just little areas are free motion stipple quilting, and then the little decorative daisies were applied later, and we've put of course a little rhinestone, heat activated rhinestone or Swarovski crystal in the middle of the little flowers. Now again we're using our twin needle quilting technique, so I don't need to go over that. This time you mark a diagonal, I think it's a 1 inch or 1.5 inch grid. And then you stitch in both directions with your twin needle. Again, you select small areas and just follow what we have done here, and a little area only to do your stipple quilting so you get more comfortable with doing it. Now, the technique we're learning here is to do at every intersection of the twin needle diagonal quilting grid, we sewed a little satin stitch ball, or maybe it was a little oval. Now, to do this, you select a satin stitch ball or oval, and you make sure that you have it, maybe that was 6, maybe 7 millimeters. Your density of your stitch is usually 0.3 or 0.25, and put your single pattern button on. Again, practice this, but pretty much you start your stitch at one side of the twin needle stitching, and it will tie off at the end of it, so you have this little satin stitch ball, which is done really easy on the intersection of each twin needle diagonal grid. Fun technique, and another one that you have learned, and then you can come and put your lovely little freestanding embroidered daisies in the center of some of the squares. I love this technique. Again, you could do this technique for a whole jacket, a purse, a pillow, and elaborate on it. So you can see how pretty this looks. Fun technique, and I know you'll enjoy doing it. Now we have two techniques here. We are using 1-inch wide strips of fabric backed with our double-sided fusible web. And I forgot to ask Simon, were there any questions from the last technique? Si?
No questions.
Now come on, girls. Am I getting this good, or are you getting too smart for me? Now there's two ways that you can do this, and when Robbie and I did this, we hadn't done it for ages and we actually screwed up. But so that you, if you want to screw up like this, is great. To get this effect, you have all your strips of fabric that are going that way. You alternate the colours, so you go this colour, this colour, this colour. But realistically, you need to, we would have all our green strips going this way and all our floral strips going this way. So you are going to, again, mark your block, vertical, horizontal, diagonal lines that intersect in the centre. And on one side of one of the diagonal lines, we've got, again, woven cheating patchwork, where it's all done up close. And then we have a woven grid. So here we would lay all our vertical fabric strips down, and we would stitch them at the top. And then we would flip up every second one, and we would lay in our woven fabric. And you just, oh, my mouth's not working. You just repeat this and alternate the ones you flip back. But we make sure you push each one, each row up close to each other so it looks like one piece of fabric. And then you will notice here that all our little pink squares, or our fabric squares, have a little satin stitch ball, and all our green squares have a little satin stitch scallop around them. So that way you can play with your stitches, and you can see that we are seeing this patch and the green patch, and this patch and the green patch. And it does give a great effect. I would do this side first, again, which is weaving strips of fabric. And then these edges along here, before I fuse them down, I would cut them back to 1/4 of an inch over this line and press them in place and then do this one. You can see here to cover the raw fabric edges here, again we played with decorative stitching, and here we actually, you can lay this piece of freestanding lace, so you learn how to do freestanding lace in the seam line, or you can simply glue it on afterwards as we did our row of freestanding daisies and butterflies and decorations, which I will go through with you in a moment. Just remember, any order that is placed before the 15th of November this year will receive the directions and patterns for this gorgeous little magic pillow. It is one of my favorites. Dreams come a size too big so we can grow into them. Isn't that good? It is. It really is a great thing. We have these dreams and we have to see ourselves doing it. I'll share something with you. I'm sure for those of you who are new, I'm a gym junkie. I have a personal trainer. And I've been doing crunches lately and leg ups with your shoulders off the ground. And whenever I do something, I see myself doing it in my head, and it's a lot more than I think I can do. And my personal trainer said to me the other day, when I had done more than she expected me to do, Jenny, do you have a goal in your head? Do you see yourself doing this before you do it? And she picked up on it, and I said, yes, I do. I have a number in my head, and any great athlete or any great artist or anyone that achieves something always has a vision and sees themselves doing it. Now, of all the techniques that I've shown you, this is probably my favorite. On this, we are doing fussy cutting, naive applique, fussy cutting around the edge of our applique flowers and leaves, and you can see the additional stitches, which is called thread painting. Now, in the centres of our squares, which you can do before the stitching if you like, I have just done a little scroll. And remember, if you are quilting, you are just beginning to quilt, Invisa sheer thread is a great way to start, because the finer your thread, the less people will see any perceived, and I use the word perceived, imperfections. So if you want to use a thread, I would use a 60 denier thread. The finer the thread, the less people are going to see any perceived imperfections in free motion quilting. Now for this one, I'm going to go step by step, because this is the one that I find people often get the most confused with. We are going to mark our, we are not going to, let me see, I was going to see, no, we are going to mark our block a little differently this way, but we will need our vertical and horizontal mark lines on the block. So here it is when we have decorated it. So let's go down. Woven stitch building in effect uses stacked rows of stitching to form a lattice to give the effect that each row of stacked stitching passes over and under each row to give the effect of a lattice. Okay. Make sure your block is square, vertical, horizontal lines. It's only a small thing, so use the fabric marking pen to mark a 1.5 inch vertical and horizontal grid on the block. Then use the photo below to mark horizontal bridges, stitch over lines, and vertical tunnels, stop and start on each side of the vertical lines across the intersecting lines that are a scant 1/4 inch apart. So what I'm saying here, this is a bridge, scant 1/4 inch apart. This is a tunnel. So we will stitch through here and stop there and start again on the other side and stitch through. Let's see the next slide. There you go. All right. This shows you very succinctly. So these lines here are 1/2 inch in length, and this here is a scant 1/4 inch. So in this row, we would sew to there, stop, sew all the way through, stop, start, sew all the way through. Now my suggestion is that your blocks are all marked much bigger than you need them to be. You will need your Sheer Magic Plus, your fusible fleece on the back of your blocks, as well as a tearaway stabilizer. Again, practice your stitches before you do them. You will be able to start at least each row 1/2 inch in from your marked lines. Now, say this is your block and you've marked all these, then your blocks are big enough so you can start 1/2 inch in. The reason for this is you're not starting on the edge of your fabric. Now you will use the open toe foot, Microtex 80 needle, my rayon threads, fine pre-round bobbin, the crisp tearaway matrix stabilizer at the back of the block for all stitching. Now you can see my suggested stitches and the stitch width and length. And again, these are open stitches, so they are easy to sew. Remember to sew over the bridges, which are horizontal parallel lines, and stop on one side of the tunnel and start again on the other side of the tunnel, which are the vertical lines. So here you can see we are starting to sew our stitching. On the left-hand side, you can see here that we've stopped at a tunnel and sewn through the bridge. Stopped at a tunnel, and because we're sewing a vertical row of stitching, we will stop there. Use your instant stop tie off button if you have it, otherwise finish your stitch. And then remember, when you start on the other side of the tunnel, that you're going to need to press pattern start button. So you're going to start at the beginning of the stitch pattern again. You can see here this has been a tunnel, and this was our vertical line, and now when we turn it around and we're sewing in the opposite direction, it becomes a bridge. We are sewing with our pink thread here. See our horizontal lines to our vertical row of stitching. We are going to stop at our tunnel. Any questions on that, Simon?
No, we haven't had any questions on that.
Okay. A satin stitch scallop, and I give you the width, density, and pattern length, is now sewn on each side of the open stitches in matching thread to the open grid stitching, as the scallop should match, or as close as possible, on each side of the open grid stitching. The left side of the stitching will be mirrored to the right. Do not turn your fabric to sew the second row of stitching. Rather, start at the top of your fabric as you did for the first row of stitching. Now, let's have a look at that. Now, to achieve this the easiest way, we are using our single pattern button again, and we're using our little satin stitch scallop. So where we have a weave that goes over, we are going to start our pattern, and it's a single pattern, stitch from the edge of our over weave stitching, one pattern. Mirror the stitch and stitch it on the other side. And we repeat this for each over weave on the side of the vertical row of stitching on each over horizontal weave. So this is what we're going to end up with. You're going to say, why are you doing that? Because we need to have this row of stitching with the satin stitch scallop go right through there and cover the beginning of that row of stitching. So we have a close-up. We have one row of stitching finished on the left-hand side. So our green row has been done. And we have our single pink stitches. And this is a close-up. So you can see the satin stitching is covering the beginning of these stitches. Now, automatically we would sew down, well for me, I'm trying to think, whichever way. If you sew down the left-hand side automatically, row of stitching, you do not turn your fabric to start again this end and go back. No, you start at the top, as your scallop should match from side to side for each row of stitching. And here you can see we are starting, so you can see what we've done. We've sewn right through there, we've sewn right through there, and then we will come back and we will mirror our design, and we will be starting from here. So where we have these little single stitches, you sew down to there. Mirror the pattern, start again and sew down to the other one. And to remember to tie off at the beginning and end of each row of stitching. Complete the stitch weaving. This is, as I've said, one of my all-time favourite ways of using decorative stitching. Square up the block and the stitch grid. Whenever you're squaring up the blocks for everything in this, make sure the centre of whatever your technique is centred in the block. So I do suggest that you make a template when you're doing that, and I believe it's 7.5 inches, marked with vertical and horizontal lines that you match with the vertical and horizontal line on your block and then square it up. So we've added a border to this grid. Now I want to go back to the beginning, sorry. Going back so I can show you the fabric. Here we go. Maybe the next one back. No, it's not there. We've added a border. So what I did was, whatever the width of fabric was, I think I added it to the side of the block and then flipped it over the block and pressed it down, and then a bit like schoolhouse, I think it's called patchwork, something like that. Simon, you can correct me. And then I added it across the top. Now we have, and you do it at the top and flip it back on your block. Now using the floral fabric that you have chosen, select an area and iron a double-sided fusible web onto the back of the fabric and accurately cut out these flowers, which I call fabric decoupage. Now, when you're cutting out or fussy cutting like this for fabric decoupage, you do not want to see any of the background fabric behind any flowers or any design you are cutting out. So this means if I'm doing this flower, and this would be, say, all filled in with pink or something, green maybe, I don't know, you need to cut inside the edge slightly of what you are cutting out. And remember, you are cutting it out. So if you are not getting a pleasing shape here, you can change the shape of the petals. You're the artist. You can add nick-ins, you can add curves, and the same with your leaves. You can reshape them so that you have a nice effect. Now, Naive applique means that you are not going to satin stitch the edge. Rather, you're going to use freehand straight stitching and do several rows with the same coloured thread, straight stitch in the needle to match the outside edge of what you're appliquing, and do 3 little parallel rows of stitching close to the cut edge and parallel to each other round the outside edge of the leaves and flowers. Oh, Simon's taking me down now. I must have another picture. Aha! There's a really lovely close-up one. Thank you, Simon. So you can really see close up here our flowers and our leaves. Now, I want you to all look at the shading on our petals of our flowers. Can you all see the shading on the petals of the flowers? I also want you to see the stamens. The stamens are not straight, they are curved. And the shading on our flowers is not vertical or horizontal. It follows the shape of the petal. Now you can see here this petal is turning back. So for thread painting, our rows of overlapping stitches will go in the direction, then I'd stitch around here and come backwards and forwards this way. So they follow the shape of the petal. I've chosen little areas of shading. You can see here the shading is going back the way the petal is falling. This shading is going this way. This shading is curving back this way. This shading is curving back this way. And the parallel rows or overlapping rows of straight stitching are following the curve of the stamens. You can do as much thread painting as you feel comfortable in doing. But I thought having a small section, now this is a little bit out of focus, but you again can see close up how I have shaded in the directions that the petals appear to be falling. See again here, we go this way, this way, this way, this way. Then we change to come back in the opposite direction. This petal is falling down this way, over the top of the lighter one, underneath. Our stamens are following the shape. Our leaf vein is not straight. It is following a curve. I will emphasize again, remember to stitch in the same direction as the stamens and petals appear to be falling. Do not just sew straight rows of stitching, as this will ruin the effect. So look closely at the picture of the block again and practice first. And if you are struggling to do this without lines, remember you have a fabric marking pen that you can emphasize the direction in which you want your rows of stitching to fall. Now you will use an open toe, freehand foot, and rayon thread in the needle and a freehand straight stitch. Do we have any questions, Simon?
We had a couple of questions about the weight of the thread, and I've answered those, which is 40 weight rayon.
Yes. Yeah, it is 40 weight rayon. In using our 40 weight rayon, number one, you get an absolutely gorgeous sheen. Remember, this is a quilt that you're going to want to iron, so you don't want a polyester thread that's going to melt. I remember a friend of mine, Kim Bradley, who is a fabulous quilter, and this lady had done a quilt, pieced it beautiful, and ironed it with a very hot steam iron, and when Kim put it on the rollers to stretch it, it all came apart because the polyester thread had melted. Okay, so you can, what we've done here is fussy cutting with applique. So again, what you need to do to start with is to print off a pattern template. So in your software, bring up this little heart. There are 4 little hearts and 1 larger one. So print off from the actual, through your software, call up the design, and on a 1-to-1 scale, print this off. Now, what I need you to do is to cut out the inside, not around the outside edge of the hearts, the inside edge of the heart. Now this will give you a square that has nothing in the heart outline that you cut out. You can then place this over the design in the fabric that you want to repeat in your fussy cutting. You then trace around the inside edge of the heart, so you then know that this is the design that you want. Now you know on your stitch printout or design printout from your software, it will be marked with vertical and horizontal lines that intersect through the center of the design you're going to use. While the heart fabric is still that you've outlined, you haven't cut anything yet, come with a fabric marking pen and mark corresponding vertical and horizontal lines on the flower that match those on your printout. So you will mark through here and through here. And of course, when you are stitching your heart, you're going to have corresponding marks marked on your block. So let's talk about that. You will have a vertical, horizontal, intersecting line, and a diagonal intersecting line. Now, I can't remember the size of this square, but you need to mark a square in the center of your block also. Now, I think this is fussy cutting, and it's also cheating trapunto, because should you choose to use matching fabric and thread to your background fabric, it then becomes like trapunto, because not only do we have on the back of our fabric, all fabric should have sheer magic plus iron to the back of it, but you can have 1 or 2 layers of fusible batting on the back of the fabric. So when you have marked your hearts on your fabric and marked the intersecting vertical and horizontal lines on your fabric, then roughly cut out a square of fabric. Remember, this has got to be appliqué. That is about that size square around your marked hearts. So obviously our center heart is in the center of our block. So we stitch, as for any applique, we stitch our first colour, which is a straight stitch heart outline. We then place our fussy cut marked fabric over the heart, matching the vertical and horizontal lines on our fabric to those, our fussy cut fabric to those on our vertical and horizontal lines marked on the block. Anyone that loves this technique, it is quick, it is easy, it is fun. Sandy's Oriental Express quilt is totally made with fussy cut hearts. And if you go on to the website, you will find a detailed video there on fussy cutting and how this quilt is put together. It is fun, it is easy, and it is quick. And Sandy had never made a quilt before, and this was her first quilt, and it looks absolutely stunning. So once we've put our heart there, now if you're worried about your fabric moving, just put a little bit of glue in the center of the fabric to be applied. So we place that down, or you can use a piece of Dissolve Magic sticky on each side, or sticky tape of the square that you have put over your heart outline. Stitch colour number 2, cut around the outside edge of the stitch line and then do your satin stitching. Now, the next thing we are going to do is our piped prairie points. And I give you directions on piped prairie points with pictures, but I have gone over them many times. You can see we've used decorative stitching on our piping of our prairie points to enhance them. Then we stitch a zigzag stitch with a neutral thread or an invisible thread. We place our piped prairie points around our vertical and on each side, our horizontal and vertical sides of our square, and stitch them down and make sure the raw fabric edges have been cut and the corners of the squares match up. So now we have our piped prairie points in place, and the next thing we're going to do is place our hearts centered on the diagonal. So the point of the heart, and you would need to use your template for this placement. The point, well, no, you should be fine, because if your lines are all correct, you just place your fabric. So we are going to have the vertical line here through the center. No, you will have to mark your horizontal line, because I didn't hoop any of this. So you place your template that you printed out centered on the diagonal lines in each direction, and then you will mark your horizontal intersecting line. Again, your fabric will match, and you do exactly as you did for the center one. Then should you choose, you can do little scroll quilting in the background before you add your freestanding lace, daisy and leaves. Any questions, Simon?
No questions.
Okay, this is a technique that's less known, I must admit. And I'm seeing my time's run out, and I've got a luncheon engagement at 12:30, so I better move it. All right, you get a template, and the template which you cut out, and I suggest you trace it onto cardboard, and you mark your borders with vertical and horizontal lines that intersect in the center of your border fabric. So you'll have a line there and a line there. And then you are going to start, and I can see I started with this one, which will match up with our center vertical line. And you trace them. So you trace that one, they're the same. And then flip it and trace this one. And you go from side to side. Flip it, trace this one, and flip it and trace this one. And make sure that you are keeping these little shapes, which are like folded ribbon, straight along the border fabric, which I believe we did after we pieced it. Then what you're going to do, now this is a hand quilting look-alike stitch. If you don't have this on your machine, or you are worried about changing your bobbin tension, then you can use a triple stitch, which will be equally nice, because once you do a triple stitch with Invisa shear thread on the outside of this will puff up. But this hand look-alike stitches, you place your pink thread in the bobbin and release the tension, bobbin tension, to virtually zero. You need to practice this, and then you place shear thread, Invisa shear thread in the needle, and tighten up the tension. Now, what this stitch is a straight stitch, and remember we have Invisa thread in our needle, so we do a straight stitch. This is a triple stitch. So the next part of the triple stitch is another straight stitch, and you see invisible thread, and then because we have a tight bobbin, when we come back and go back again, the bobbin thread is pulled up, and that's how we get our hand look-alike quilting stitch. So we have done lots and little areas of different quilting techniques. I know a friend of mine, when this first came out, did a whole quilt using this hand look-alike quilting stitch, and no one would believe it wasn't hand quilted. The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. You know, if you have a great imagination and enthusiasm, the sky is the limit. Remember that any orders placed before the 15th of November 2014, you will receive the directions and the free designs as a download after. We will email them to you after the 15th of November. So if you place the order before that date, this is our gift to you, and it's got a $20 value. Ladies, thank you very much for attending. I have to run now. I have a luncheon engagement with a dear friend of mine who I have not seen for a long time. And I hope that if you're in Australia, your day is magic, and I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. Have I missed out anything, Simon? Oh, I have. This is a close-up of our gorgeous pillow. We have lace and three-dimensional flowers. We have our fabulous quilting in the hoop, plus our gorgeous couched cord to emphasize the grid, and then we have our individual little gold lace flowers and our finished pillow. There are so many things you can do with this technique. So I know you are going to love to do it, and I have been asked so many times to give the directions. So there you are. I hope that you will remember that life is all about how we see things. I'll let you look at that. Keep looking at it and tell me what you see. Is the man facing sideways, or the lady facing sideways, or is she facing front on? I'll leave it up to you. Remember, life is all about how we see things. Have a great day. Great to talk to you all, and thank you so much. By the way, if you have any suggestions of anything you would like me to do in the webinar, and I've asked this and I don't get anything. So if you have anything you would like me to do, please let me know. Bye.